Welcome, everybody. Today, I've got such a special treat for you. We've got Todd Herman here speaking today. Todd is an award-winning author. He's a performance advisor to athletes, leaders, public figures, and is the recipient of the Inc. 500 Fastest Growing Award. He's been featured on the Today Show, Sky Business News, Inc. Magazine, CBC National News. Todd has worked with just some amazing athletes. He's been working with some known rappers, just anyone who needs to perform when the stakes are high, when they need to get on stage, when they need to give a performance, when they need to give an interview, whatever else. When the stakes are high, some of the best performers use Todd's methodology. So with that, I want to hand over to Todd. Welcome, Todd.
Thanks for having me, Allan. What I want to talk to everyone today about is something that I am maybe well known for, and that is alter egos and secret identities. As I started to get into working with higher and higher caliber athletes, there was this one particular kind of thread that kept on revealing itself, that the best of the best that consistently performed at peak levels would talk about having a performance identity, or they would have a alter ego or a secret identity that they would take out onto the field, custom built to help them win. And at first it was always like, oh, that's really cool. And I did the same thing. I was a college football player here in North America. I had an alter ego that I used when I played sport. I had a very specific identity that I'd step into to go out there and help me perform. And after hearing this enough times, I was like, wait a second, this is an actual thing. Because I track all the data of all these different clients around all these different sports. And I started asking clients like, well, what's your method? Like when you say this persona, like, what do you mean? How do you get into that? And after interviewing hundreds of clients and then just my own process, I was like, oh, this is the method for how people are doing this. And so I started using it as a tool to help athletes get onto the field and perform at their top levels. Because you're in the world of entrepreneurship, which is what I think the #1 personal growth program anyone could ever get involved in, because it challenges so many different weaknesses that you might have, insecurities, gaps in your different skills. Starting out, you've got to wear so many hats. Having this method that I'll walk through today as a tool that you can put in your tool belt to help you change more quickly is a real superpower that people can have. There was this great study that was done at the Kellogg School of Management about a decade ago. And what they did was they brought a bunch of college students one by one into a room, and there was a Stroop test that they were going to get the college students to do. And they wanted to see how quickly they could do the test with the least amount of mistakes. One by one, they do the test and they score all the results, and they have their first little cohort of college students that come through. They bring in another group, and this time the group, they had a white coat waiting for them. And they said individually to each of the students, here, put on this white painter's coat. So they put on the white painter's coat, and then they gave them the Stroop test, track all the results. And then they bring in a third group. And the third group, they give them the exact same white coat, except this time they tell them that it's a doctor's coat. So you put on the doctor's coat and you do the Stroop test. What do you think? There's any difference between the doctor's coat wearing students and the painter's coat wearing students and the plain clothes wearing students? The painter's coat and the plain clothes students, zero difference whatsoever in the results that they had. Same amount of mistakes, took them the same amount of time. The doctor's coat wearing students did it in less than half the time and made less than half the mistakes. How is that? How is it possible that just by putting on a white coat named a doctor's coat, despite the fact that it's the exact same coat as the painter's coat, how could they get a different result? It's because of a phenomenon that exists inside of the human condition called enclothed cognition. And enclothed cognition is that we as human beings, we attach story and meaning to articles of clothing and items that people wear. But how enclothed cognition works is when you put on an article, a uniform, a costume, an item, what you do unconsciously is you enclothe your mind and your abilities in the cognitive traits or emotional traits of that item. You can unpack and find all of the capabilities that you've got waiting for you. Quickly, what is an alter ego? The root of the term actually came from Cicero, and he said it in 44 BC when he said the alter ego is the other I or trusted friend within. Cicero is widely known as the greatest statesman and philosopher to ever come out of the Roman Empire. Highly successful. He wrote this 2 years before he was assassinated, so at the end of his career. And his friend was just asking him about what are some of the keys that you found to being successful. And he coined the term the alter ego, and how he was able to transmute, or he was able to change more quickly than some of the other people around him. He was using the inspiration of some of his heroes to help him level up, so to speak. And then Epictetus said in The Art of Living that invoking the characteristics of the people that you admire most and adopting their manners, speech, and behavior as your own, there is nothing false in this. We all carry the seeds of greatness within us, but we need an image as a point of focus in order that they may sprout. Now, when you relate that to what we now know just structurally with the brain or neuroscience, when you've got 70% of the human brain dedicated to the visual cortex, if you're trying to move towards something, whether it's in your business or you're trying to alter yourself in some way, without having a clear picture of what you're trying to move towards, of what that future self could look like, it's vague. And the human brain responds to clarity. When you're using, like I did, whether it was Superman or Benjamin Franklin or Joseph Campbell, which were the three heroes that I had to how I wanted to level up as a business leader, and I was taking specific characteristics and traits from each of them, that gave me a very clear picture of how I wanted to show up. They became models for me. Now, if I tried to perfectly be Joseph Campbell or perfectly be Benjamin Franklin, I'd be a second-rate version. But I'm using it as a source of inspiration, and it gives me a great anchor point for how I want to move forward. One of the challenging parts about being an adult is reconciling the fact that so much of our identity and how we get built is born out of experiences that we had in our youth, or environments that we grew up in, or our parents. There's this great moment in the movie Rocket Man, which is the story of Elton John, where Reggie John, which is Elton John's first name, he was just kind of getting started. And there was this old wise musician who in the back room said to him this:
You gotta kill the person you were born to be in order to become the person you want to be.
You got to kill the person you were born to be in order to become the person that you want to be. The only thing I'd change about that is I'd say sometimes you got to kill the person you were shaped into being to become the person you want to be. If you want to go there, if you want to make a big shift in the way that you show up in your business, or you want to make a big shift in your business, or you have a huge new goal, not just in business, but in life, can be another area, or you're changing a role, having a mental model in your mind of someone or something that you'd like to be more like is extremely helpful. So for me, when I was becoming a new parent, and I was able to quickly go, this person that I am in my business, is that really who I am? I'm a challenger personality type. I got to challenge sometimes the tough exteriors of the egos of some extremely accomplished human beings. But is that really who I am? Or is that a useful persona that I step into in order to effectively win on this field of play called my coaching or my training? Well, that's not all that I am. That's only one aspect of me. That's a role that I play in my life. And so now this new role as being a dad, and how do I want to show up there? Now I'm deciding, it's a key question. How do I want to show up on that field or in that role? And I already knew exactly how I wanted to show up. I wanted to show up inspired by my own father, and also this guy right here, Mr. Rogers, because I wanted to be more kind and playful and loving and creative and fun around my kids. So now I've got two very useful identities to help me win on that field of play. Not all the time. Does that mean that I'm perfect? Because no. But if I can be 20% better because I'm using the source code of inspiration from someone and something else that I have deep reverence for, or deep compassion for, or deep love for, brilliant. That's the beautiful thing about people like you in business alone. Think about all of the hats that you've had to wear to get to where you are, right? There's the sales hat. There's the operational hat. There is the promoter hat, possibly. There's the leader and manager hat that you had to wear as well. There's the service delivery or product creation or service creation hat that you had to wear. Are all of them the exact same? If you're going to put together a job description for all of these, would it just be a template of the exact same person? No. And yet we think that somehow we're doing something wrong because we might be adjusting parts of our personality based on the context of our life. It's such a fundamental flaw, proudly given to us by the self-help, personal development, and spiritual worlds. They had it all wrong. How many of you have ever heard of this term called single self theory? So single self theory was one of the core 5 underlying principles of the world of psychiatry and psychology. For 80 plus years, they had the frame that then impacted how they worked with clients and wrote books and stuff, that the people who are the healthiest mentally, meaning that they have the least amount of anxiety and stress disorders or depressive disorders, have one identity, one single self that they see themselves through, and they consistently act through it across the different domains of their lives. Didn't make sense to me when I came across that in a book to help me continuously level up for our performance company. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense, because when my hockey player or my football player or my lacrosse player gets off of the ice, the field, court, whatever, they're very different. I want them to be different because I don't want that football player acting the same way when he's out in the world of his social life or his personal life. Didn't make any sense. In 2008, a huge shift happened in the world of psychology, and they completely threw that idea away, and they recognized that multiple self-theory, the people who saw themselves as having many sides to themselves, had the lowest rates of stress and anxiety disorder. Really important. The big discovery was that people don't have one self, they have many selves on many fields of play. And so when I'm simply intentionally deciding how I want to be in that world, that isn't me being fake. That's me finally taking control of the steering wheel in my life and guiding myself towards the way that I want to be. So step number 1 in this process is decide which role or field of play, possibly using an alter ego as a mechanism to help you change, is most important to you. So that role could be the one that you're most frustrated with right now, the one that you're avoiding the most, the one that's challenging you, or even the one that's the most that you want to have more fun with, be more playful with. And the idea of fake it till you make it is that's what's wrong with that statement. Just a platitude, right? That's why this alter ego in the book has sold hundreds of thousands of copies around the world and got adapted into a show and stuff, is because it's a method. It's an actual scientific method for how you do it. And again, even just the choices of words that people have used, fake it. No one wants to be fake necessarily. That's not it. This is just honoring, actually, this is the human experience. This is actually the fastest way that you can actually adjust yourself and transform and change into something else, and also reveal more of what you're made of. So if step 1 is finding out that role or that area of your life that is either challenging you or you want to be more playful with, number 2 is then going and finding your source code. What I mean by that is finding your source code is, if I'm being challenged in my current role with these certain ways that I'm showing up or these results that I'm getting, how do I really want to be in that space? If I could custom design a human being that's built to win in that arena or in that field or in that role, what would it be? That's why, like, when I'm looking at my dad's self, if I couldn't be here and I had to hire someone else to parent my kids, so that's a disassociative question, which is what's helpful about it. If I had to hire someone to, God forbid, parent my kids, who would I want to hire? I'd want them to be kind to them. I'd want them to be fun. I'd want them to be loving. I'd want them to be patient. So that's finding the source code for how I want to show up in those situations. Chapter number 1, I call it the phone booth moment. The moment where Superman runs into the phone booth and he goes off and he saves the world. The phone booth moment is because something happened. All of us have events, circumstances, situations happen. The problem, though, is that we live in high conflict experiences, right? Meaning you're always challenged with issues and decisions that are going to not only impact you, but a lot of other people based on whatever your response is. There's phone booths that we're walking into or walking through every single day. But have we really sat down and thought about how do I want to show up in those conflict zones? Mine is kind, patient, understanding, playful, fun, loving. That's my source code. So that's one way to get to your source code. The other way to get to your source code is to think of who you're already inspired by. So it's like an outward in process. That's what happened to me with building out my first alter ego in business, for really running the sales side of my business, because I was avoiding all of the important promotional and sales parts of my business. So what I did was I built out Super Richard. Super Richard was a composite of Superman, Benjamin Franklin, and Joseph Campbell. Superman specifically, man of action. Benjamin Franklin was his ability to shapeshift. If you look at his career, if you know anything about Benjamin Franklin, he was successful in so many different domains. He was decisive. And then third was Joseph Campbell's ability to articulate himself in a very complex set of subject matter. And here I wasn't communicating myself very well. I wasn't taking action. I wasn't being decisive. I wasn't confident. So that became my outside in approach. I used those three as my model to find, well, what is it about Superman that I like? Oh, he's a man of action. Okay, that's what I need. So that became the theme. So that's the source code part of the equation. And then the third one then is to identify your totem. We talked earlier about Mr. Rogers. There's a documentary came out about Mr. Rogers, and then Hollywood wanted to make a movie about his life. So who do you go to that could possibly embody Mr. Rogers? Well, let's bring in Tom Hanks. And in preparation for this role, I do what any good actor is going to do. I prepare for it and I do some research. And so he watched 78 episodes of Won't You Be My Neighbor, Mr. Rogers' PBS television show. And he talks about how he fell in love with this guy. He finally got what he was all about. And he's like, what an American treasure kind of thing. And I want you to remember the enclothed cognition thing that we talked about, the doctor's coat, and what those traits of a doctor's coat meant. Mr. Rogers, he had a specific uniform he wore all the time: red sweater, blue shoes. At the start of every single episode, he'd come in and he'd put on his red sweater and button it up and put on his blue shoes. So listen to what Tom Hanks says about his experience of becoming Mr. Rogers.
First of all, you put on that red sweater and those blue shoes, you might as well be putting on Batman's cape and cowl.
Right, yeah.
You feel powerful.
Do you?
Yeah, you do.
When you put on that red sweater and blue shoes, you might as well be putting on Batman's cape and cowl. You feel powerful. Could he have had that experience if he never went and watched those 78 episodes? No, not a chance. Couldn't have. The reason is because when you're choosing your source code or your model for how you want to show up and who you want to use as your source of inspiration, you have to be emotionally connected to them. We are triune beings. We are mental, emotional, and physical. We think about ideas. We have thoughts about ourselves and others. We have emotional responses to those. We have experiences from our past. And then somehow that goes out there and takes action through our behaviors and our habits and the routines that we set up in our lives. Most people, they know what they want. You really do. You know what you want to go and create. But there's this discrepancy between your results out on that field of play. And the reason that most people cannot get what they know to be true in their head of how they want to show up out there is because the drawbridge of emotion doesn't allow those ideas to get into your behaviors and your actions, which is why the alter ego is so powerful. Because when you use a source of inspiration for how you want to show up in the world, and you're disassociating from your own narrative of what you think you can and cannot do, there's way less friction that's there. And now all of a sudden you can show up a lot more like you most want to. So step number 3 is all about what's the totem, the artifact, the uniform that you could have, the thing that you could put on. So I went out and bought a pair of non-prescription glasses. Back in 1997, when wearing glasses wasn't cool or trendy. And I used it as my reverse Superman. Superman put on his glasses to become Clark Kent. I put them on to become Super Richard, embodying the traits. And this was my cape. And when I put these on, I was stepping into that idea of Super Richard. And the moment I found myself not acting in alignment or in accordance with the traits that I was trying to embody, those glasses came off. Can't wear the cape. Can't wear the cape, man. And dishonor the memory or the idea of those other people if you're wearing the glasses. Having that, what it does is it creates a state change for people. It creates a ritual for you to be intentional about how you want to show up. And so what we found is that being able to activate the identity that you want, to shape how you show up in the different important domains of your life, was one of the ultimate methods to help people finally achieve the goals that they had and get out of their own way, so to speak, and level up in the world.
Todd, thank you so much. That was amazing. I might ask you a question, Todd.
Yep.
When do you start getting into your alter ego? Is it in the 5 minutes prior? Is it an hour prior?
It's all personal to everybody. I'll give you an example. So what people don't know is that Rafa Nadal, so one of the greatest tennis players of all time, I worked with this team to build out his alter ego 20 years ago. Rafa spends 5 minutes in front of the mirror transforming into that alter ego and that performance tennis identity that he wants out there. If you actually knew Rafa, and I'm sure most of you can actually get the experience from just seeing him, he's one of the most kind human beings that's out there. Like, he is a very easy to love guy. But when you think about the competitive nature of sport, that kindness could possibly be an enemy for him on the court. He wouldn't have the killer instinct. And so the guy who goes out there is very, very different. It's a 5-minute ritual that he goes into. We've all heard the importance of having good habits and routines. At the elite level is a really important takeaway. One of the things that's been lost in the last 50, 60 years in our cultures is rituals. In cultures of the past, there was always these ritualistic experiences that a boy or a girl would go through to graduate from being a girl to a teen or a woman, or a boy to a man. In a tribe, there would be some sort of quest that he would have to go on in order to graduate to that. Rituals is the combination of something that you're doing or something that you have, or a routine, mixed with story and narrative. So that's why these glasses, it's to everyone else. That's why you could have an alter ego and I wouldn't even know it, because it's a personal thing for you. But these glasses, you don't know the story of what's in these glasses, right? And so for me, after a while, I can just put them on, and because of the nature of these arms going past my ears, it's like an on-off switch. I know exactly what I'm stepping into in the intention, because it's just practiced so much. I would say that the intensity of the performance typically means it might extend the amount of time that you might need to like really intentionally get into that. But then after a while, you won't need it, because the neuroplasticity of the brain engages with it so fast.
That's great. Yeah, I remember reading in your book, you said Beyonce no longer uses her alter ego. She's now become it, essentially.
Yeah, there's a quote that I share in the book, and I share it all the time in the presentations, which is this one right here from Cary Grant, who said, "I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be until finally I became that person, or he became me. But at some point we met." And Cary Grant was widely known as one of the most debonair, charismatic, and charming men in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But he grew up in Bristol, England, single mom, poor family, battled depression and a lot of anxieties throughout his life. But then when he got to Hollywood, he started to really craft this persona. And that's what he said. That was an interview at the end of his career, where he said, I became the person I want to be. So think about 2 circles in a Venn diagram. This is where you are now, and this is the sort of the idealized version of yourself. And by you, and the bridge that connects them is this alter ego, because it's such a good tool. And then eventually they overlap and you're like, oh, I'm doing this naturally now.
Thank you so much, Todd. Where's the best place for someone to reach you or get one of your resources?
So if you go to toddherman.me, that's my home base on the internet, and all the things that I'm involved in, different businesses and programs, is all right there. And you can click on that to go to alteregoeffect.com. All my social media links are there, but at alteregoeffect.com, there's more resources that I talk about that are inside the book to help you more easily create or get inspiration for the different methods that we talk about. But yeah, thanks again for having me. Appreciate it, Al.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Todd.
Bye, everyone.